So, welcome everyone to today's beautiful webinar. It's going to be an amazing experience today. And I would like you all to present yourselves in the chat to say where are you coming from. Maybe if you want to share your LinkedIn, you're all in the ecosystem, you know each other, but if you want to network afterwards or put your LinkedIn's, you're free for that. For now, I want to present our speaker. We're going to present Sophie Lacey, and after her presentation, we will have a Q&A session. And if we have time, we will talk about things that are going on in the ecosystem. But first of all, I would like to present our speaker today, Sophie Lacey. So let me present her. Sophie, she's a copywriter for designers of spaces and places and a biophilic meditation teacher. She has two very fulfilling hats. One as a writer for architects, interior designers, landscape designers, and placemakers, the right spot here, helping them find their voice and tell compelling stories about their world. She has a background in digital print marketing and creative copywriting going back over 25 years, with a special interest in design and lifestyle. And the other hat as a meditation and mindfulness teacher, interweaving traditional practices with nature connection, using both real nature and analogs. Many classes pick up on the same themes found in biophilic design, such as grounding in earth, being with water, cycles of light, color energy, natural patterns, plants and essential oils, orientation in space, soundscapes, seasonality, and multisensory awareness. Her experience as a meditation teacher flows into her copywriting, helping design professionals tell stories about well-being in natural spaces and the importance of biophilia and regenerative mindsets in the world of design. Likewise, her storytelling inspires her students with the meditations she creates. I'm very pleased to present Sophie today as our speaker for this amazing webinar, Biophilic Design at Sourcing with Meditation and Sensory. And let me I will stop sharing, and I will let now Sophie to start her amazing presentation. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you, Nuria. Thank you. That was a lovely introduction. Welcome everybody to this presentation and Q&A at the end. I'm going to begin by sharing a slideshow, and I will talk through each slide. I will try not to rush through, but I'll also try not to talk too much on each one. And then if we can pick up any kind of thoughts, reflections, questions on the things I've discussed at the end, as Nuria says, I think that might be the most fluid way of doing it. So I will get started. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone hear me? Great. Okay. So let me just go into slide. Great. So I think Nuria has already done all the bio and the introductory piece, so I won't linger for too long on that. But really, these are the key takeaways. My perspective being that I wear two hats, which are increasingly connected. There was a time when I didn't talk about my meditation life at all with my clients in architecture and design. That was my main career pathway, was my copywriting, and it didn't feel like nature connection and meditation crossed over into that at all. But particularly during lockdown, during COVID, when everybody started to rethink their purpose in life and to make more profound connections and communities, particularly online, I found that there was a huge world out there of biophilic interest. And also I noticed that different messaging was starting to creep into my brand stories that I was being asked to write for developers and architects in particular. So it felt like all these arrows were popping up all over the place, and this was clearly the way to go forward. So let me just go on to the next slide. So Nura has already done this bit, so I won't stay with that. So once I got my meditation diploma certificate, I was invited to go and teach meditation outdoors by the University of Oxford at their botanic garden and also their arboretum, which is linked to the botanic garden. It's all part and parcel of the same thing, which of course I jumped at the chance to do that. And they were very interested in taking a forest bathing approach because they had a rare collection of maples, and they were interested in enhancing the Japanese aspect of the Arboretum. Now, I should say at this point that in some ways, this is not an authentic forest bathing experience, in the sense that in Japan, you would be taken out into deep natural forest. And this is a man-made arboretum centered around a pine tum, but many of the same principles still apply. And I'm actually very interested in how you can apply the same ethos and the same ideas of natural spaces to man-made spaces or human planted created spaces. So a lot of what I am talking about now will apply across both scenarios. So just to give you a little kind of walkthrough, point by point, of how we would meet in the space and what we would do, bearing in mind that in my case, I only have a half-day window to do this. So in Japan, proper inverted commas forest bathing experience would take place over a whole day or maybe over a few days. So this is a half day. It's a kind of condensed experience, but again, the same principles apply. So we would begin by gathering in the space, being in the space and creating a circle. And I would begin by introducing the concept of forest bathing, where it comes from, the fact that it's actually not a particularly old concept. It goes only as far back as the 1980s in terms of how it's been researched and how it's been applied to healthcare. And we talk a little bit about the Japanese research, what's actually been found scientifically. And then we begin by a mindfulness through breath experience, where I ask everyone to close their eyes and focus on the breath and kind of connect with the experience of breathing, which is a cornerstone of meditation practice. Then we do a short yoga class. I have a yoga partner who teaches alongside me. She does a 40-minute class with some sort of nature theme. It could be the elements or some other grounding yoga experience, normally very beginner friendly, because people come to these events at all levels of experience and interest. We then have a mindful walking practice where I give everyone some invitations, a handout, and I ask them to notice particular aspects of the Arboretum, and I will come on to that in a minute, what kind of things I ask people to connect with. Then we come back to circle. We do a multi-sensory meditation with our eyes open, pulling in some of the things that people have picked up on their walk. So for example, we go through each one of the senses, focusing on what we can smell, what we can taste, what we can touch, what we can see, etc., what we can hear. Then I send people away from the circle on their own, and I ask them to go and find a particular tree or a particular shrub or a particular flower that they feel drawn to. And I ask them to go and sit with that particular tree or flower and contemplate it, which means going into a deep mindfulness experience, but then also a deep storytelling or creative experience where I ask them to allow the mind to wander wherever it wants to go. And that might incorporate memories, associations. It's often a very, very deep experience. People come back to Circle with incredible stories of dreams and people's gardens that they remember as a child, family connections, friends connections, all sorts of things. It's usually incredibly sort of eye-opening and connecting and very moving very often. And then we close the circle with a gratitude. We have a kind of a space in the circle where people can put things that they found, feathers, pine cones, flowers, twigs, things that they feel have spoken to them in some way. And we sort of thank everyone for coming, and we connect with everyone and ask them all to speak into the circle. So that's kind of how it finishes, which feels like a very rapid stop, but this takes place over about 3 hours. So that's just to say how that works. And then, so I'm going to now break some of this down in a little bit more detail and a little bit more depth, and hopefully you can see already through these slides things that you'll be familiar with through your work in biophilic design. A lot of these things will be, oh yes, of course, these are things that I incorporate into my schemes. You may talk about them in slightly different terms. You may use different words, different terminology, but the essence of it is the same. So the first thing is the quality of air, and I talk a lot about breath and the importance of breathing well. And of course, in a place like a forest or an arboretum, you have this incredible air quality that is created by the trees themselves and all the plants and the chemicals, the phytoncides that are released into the atmosphere. And we talk a little bit about what has been found in Japan to be the health benefits of being exposed to these phytoncides. And there are, without delving too deeply into the science here, there are some measurable effects, such as increase in T cells in the immune system and drop in stress hormones, which can be measured through blood tests. There are lots of sort of emerging research papers that are looking at slightly different aspects, but hopefully you can see from this that there's already quite a profound change. The text in green here is after a day in the forest. So, and they're now looking more closely to see what exactly is the cocktail of phytoncides that is the most helpful. And we know, for example, that there are particular things happening with conifers, evergreens, particular blends of trees. And that's why I think being in an arboretum is actually really helpful, because you get, even though it's an artificial planting, you get a mix of trees. They think that the same effect doesn't quite happen in a monoculture, and it's possible that the same effect doesn't quite happen in a deciduous wood as well. So that's kind of where we are with that, but it's still quite early days. And in terms of social prescribing in this country, in the UK, of forest bathing, we're not actually sure that we can fully replicate the Japanese experience. So I think it's quite important to say that, because a lot of that is to do with their ecosystem. But also fungus will play into all of that as well. And I'm sure some of you know, the study of fungus and the mycelial network and all of that, again, still quite early days in terms of producing science. So and then we talk about various material elements, the value of being connected with earth, the importance of being connected with earth, and also the benefit of being surrounded by wood on all sorts of different levels, tactile as well as grounding and smell and all of that. In Japan, they would also try to incorporate water where they can, things like waterfalls, clear water, fresh water. As you know, that's a huge part of the biophilic experience is water. I can't do that in the Arboretum because there is no fresh water there. But where we can find water in, for example, mosses, we will incorporate that into the experience as well. And we talk about plants and other creatures. And also really important to say, we talk about people as well and connecting with each other as part of that ecosystem. Then we come on to talking about the importance of grounding and stillness in the space, but also the importance of movement. So this is where the yoga class comes in, and also the walking, that actually moving in nature and moving our bodies is a really important part of this. Then we talk about the experience of space. And again, this is probably where you'll start to feel and hear similar themes, things like the prospect and refuge idea, what it feels like to be in an open space and what it feels like to be in an enclosed, safe, secure space, the importance of variety of space and how you get that naturally in a natural environment like a forest, and also what people feel when they're raised up, above or below. Hopefully all of these things will be resonating with you as designers. And then we talk a little bit about perspective, about the difference between a macrocosmic experience and a microcosmic experience. So I ask people to use their eyes like a camera with different lenses. I ask people to stand back from views, and I ask people to hone in on the tiny, tiny detail of things like pine cones, snail shells, twigs, and then to stand back and look at how trees overlap with each other and how they overlap against the sky. And I talk a little bit about the Japanese concept of ma, the idea that spaces between forms are as important as the forms themselves, and what a vital part of observation, sort of from a spatial point of view, that is. And we talk about fractals, pattern finding, natural fractals, and how important that is for our health and well-being. Then we talk a little bit about natural treasure hunting, and by that I mean the fact that everywhere you look you can find natural treasure, and how important those connections are, whether it's something like a new bud coming or a feather floating down to the ground, and how all of those micro experiences of natural shapes and natural things, and how that informs our experience, and we can meditate on all of those experiences. Light through trees, of course, light, the experience of light is a massive aspect, important aspect of biophilic design. So we talk about how the trees create different light effects, and I've got some images of that I'll show you in a minute. It's also about the different light cycles, and the whole thing with how light changes during the day and the night, and how it changes across different seasons as well. The energetics of colour. Specifically in this context, I focus on the colour green, and how there are some studies showing that we respond differently to the colour green from other colours, that as human beings, we actually can pick up more shades and tones of green than we can any other colour. That's probably part of our biophilic wiring, that we are supposed to respond to green differently because of our wiring and our association with health, landscape, resources, foraging, etc., etc. Then we talk about textures, the importance of texture and tactile experience, the underused sense of touch, natural soundscapes. I ask people to listen for things like bird song, and we talk about lovely words that are associated with the sound of breeze through trees. There's a lovely word, sithyrism, and I just love the sound of that word. Sithyrism is literally the sound of leaves blowing in the wind, and if you sit in that arboretum in just the right amount of breeze, you can hear the trees and how important it is to connect on that level. Then we also cover the sort of personal experience of trees, how we can have, as I mentioned before, contemplative experiences, but also how we can apply the life of trees to our lives as human beings. Talk a little bit about the mycelial network, about communities of trees and what those communities of trees teach us about sharing and being. Talk a little bit about spirit of place and genius Loki, and how the Japanese interpret that in Shintoism, the idea that everything is animated, that everything has spirit. And so there are these spirits of trees, and so on, and how we can pull all of that in and cross-reference it with Western ideas of spirit of place or sense of place, which is so important in architecture and design. And then again, I talk about perception, different dimensions, large and small scale, but also dimensions of time, how these places, including the Arboretum or a wood, will have a past as well as a present. And they'll also have a future, and what it means to think in time terms across different time scales. So here are just some little kind of prompts. These are pictures that I've taken in the Arboretum. This was my actual snapshot of lying underneath a tree doing yoga. Just to show you how these trees create these canopies and what it means to breathe the trees as we're lying there doing our shavasana. Okay, next one. Examples of fractal patterns, macro and micro scale. These picking up on some of the things that we've talked about space and form and connectivity. This was one of the mosses that I photographed while I was there, and I hope you can see in this image how much water it holds. And the incredible intelligence of things like mosses, you know, that they have this ability to hold water. And it ties in a little bit to kind of biomimicry and simplicity versus complexity of natural systems, and how it really helps us to kind of stop and appreciate how clever nature is. Okay. So when I send people walking, I ask them to stop and pick things up off the ground and really study them on a textual level, tactile level, but also visual. And if there's any sound, smell, taste as well. Some of the trees in the Arboretum just have the most extraordinary bark, and you can't help actually by just putting your hand on there and touching. So we do quite a bit of tree hugging and tree touching while we're there. You sort of can't avoid it, even if you're a bit reticent about the idea. By the time you've finished, you just can't help yourself. Okay. This is we are talking about light effects. The Japanese have this beautiful word komarebi, which is a translation of light through trees. This isn't the Arboretum, this is my local woodland that I use with a local group to me in Oxfordshire. And this was happening when I took people there in the summer. And it was just beautiful how the light was filtering through. So it's a perfect excuse to talk about light. Okay, so now I'm going to come on to just talking about how nature-based meditation, biophilic meditation, helps with the design process in kind of broad terms. So the first thing, which is probably the most obvious one, is how it takes us deep into the experience of space and nature, and how focused attention just gives you so many new ways of connecting, which obviously as design professionals, that's really important to be able to connect with the schemes and the concepts that you're putting together. You know, where are those ideas coming from in the first place, and what things are they based on in nature? So, and it's a kind of inward process, but it's also an outward process. So meditate. The reason I talk about myself as a meditation teacher as opposed to a mindfulness teacher is that I think of it as meditation being the broad sweep, that mindfulness is present moment focused attention, non-judgmental focused attention. But meditation can also be imaginative as well. It isn't necessarily present moment. It can also cast us back, and it can cast us forward, and it can take us away from what we have here now into something much more almost like dream life, imaginative life. So I think that's really important for creative vision, to also allow our imaginations to go free. So that's what we call in meditation terms open monitoring, where we deliberately allow the mind to wander. And that's almost like an opposite experience from a controlled mindfulness practice, which is all about focus. And we can go inwards and outwards in terms of space. So I like to think of it that we're connecting the inner space of ourselves with the outer space of our design world. That in the end, what we can try to achieve is an idea of those boundaries just falling away, and it just becomes one space. Us and the space we live in is all one, without getting too into kind of the Buddhist idea of oneness. I think it's important to say my perspective here is that I think of biophilic design as much a spiritual thing as a scientific thing and as a material thing, and that actually we have to go beyond the metrics. We have to go behind the metrics to the experience, to the unquantifiable experience. As human beings, we connected with nature long before we had words, long before we had numbers, long before we could measure. We connected with nature in an intuitive, seamless, physical, spiritual way. So that's kind of where I come at all of this from, is going. That's why I call it biophilic design at source, because I'm trying to go back to the beginning. And these things are all important because they allow us to design more intuitively and more authentically. So now trying to draw this together with what I do for design professionals as a writer. This is really around storytelling and translating this into words. And I find that for some designers, it can be hard to convey benefits to their clients outside the visual narrative. Some designers are fabulous writers, but some aren't, and some don't particularly want to be, because that's not really how their minds work. So I believe very strongly that we need words as well as images to invite people into our visions and concepts. There's so much that we can tell people through visual, through illustration, through photography, through modeling, but we need words. We need words to invite people in. We need words to bring visuals to life. So that's kind of where I come in to the overall picture. And meditation gives us opportunities for multi-sensory stories. Gives us angles, if you like, new hooks, new angles on biophilic design by helping us connect. So these are the things that, in my experience working with clients, aiming at the kind of end user, if you like, of space, these are the sorts of things that people want to know about what you're doing. And some of this might be very obvious to you, but but perhaps there are some extra things that you haven't thought of. So a lot of this, we talk a lot about evidence and well-being benefits. Absolutely, it's important to incorporate what the evidence says, to talk about metrics and proof points, but also to try to convey how things feel. And that can be quite hard to do. So storytelling is a really good place to do that. So at the bottom here in green, I've sort of outlined what a good design story, how a good design story is constructed. So you begin by expressing the need. Why do people need what you're doing, what you're designing for them? What is the resolution or the execution of what you're doing, and what is the ultimate impact? So say, for example, you're telling people about a house that you've designed, an interior that you've designed. Why? First of all, begin with why are we doing this? What is the design challenge, if you like? What's the brief? What's the need that's not being met? And then what's the execution? And include into that your proof points and metrics, and what's the impact? How is this place going to improve people's lives, basically? Okay. These are real examples of meditations that I've taken people into, but hopefully you can see how they make great stories, how you can turn the experience of meditations into a story that backs up your design scheme. So for example, if you're using a particular wood, how we can really focus on the benefit of that wood from a smell point of view. That's something that it's a slightly separate subject, but I feel is a kind of much neglected sense. We don't talk enough about sense of smell in biophilic design, so that's something that I want more people to do more of. talk about oils from wood, for example, or the smell of fabric. Individual tactile responses to material. You can make stories. You can make small stories out of all of these. Experience of light in a room. Each of these, as I say, they are all meditations that I use for people, but hopefully you can see, sorry, I've gone back a slide, how all of these, and also color responses, every response to a color that you use can be documented in a story. And when I say story, I suppose technically it would be a case study, but I like to think of them more as project stories rather than case studies, because I think it's more emotive. Again, these are meditations that have been turned into, or can be turned into, stories, talking about the natural elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. Nuria, I know you did something on the platform about that with favorite elements. I touched already on natural sounds, experience of individual spaces and why they're so good for us. These are all things that can be turned into stories. Feeling of shapes. It's touching a little bit on sacred geometry. I don't want to go too much into that today. That's a whole other subject, but keeping it as kind of consumer friendly and user friendly as possible. You can talk to people about why circles make you feel different things from squares and lines. Okay. Hopefully this little infographic here gives you an idea of how all of this in the presentation kind of fits together. Starting with being in the space, that it's important for all of us who work in this field to take time ourselves to be in natural space, and how meditation plugs in the senses. That's kind of number one, foundation stone. And I think I've covered already how it can be present moment mindfulness, or it can be imaginative. And some of those imaginative experiences can also be delivered through virtual nature. Nuria, you mentioned in the bio at the beginning that I'm interested in the effects of virtual nature as well as in actual nature. That our experience is often wordless, but it also gives you language, and it's through language that you're able to deliver stories to your clients, because that's all about conveying benefit. And at the end of the day, that's what all of us are doing, whether we kind of resist it or not. We are trying to persuade people that what we do is valuable to them. And then just to kind of finish on different ways that I can deliver and support you, and hopefully how all of those different aspects feed in. And if it's meditation in particular that you're looking for, or people are looking for, again, there are different ways I can be involved. So I'm now going to throw this open to you for questions and answers and reflections.
I want to say thank you,
Thank
Sophie.
you.
It's so touching and it's so meaningful what you said today, and I agree so much with you on the feelings and on the way we're experiencing nature. I have a lot of questions for you, but I'm going to let the public to ask you first those questions that they probably have. It's been very inspiring. Yeah, I do agree.
Good.
I do agree that we need to go that way. I do take my customers to nature before we start creating a space, in order to have this experience with them, and to understand what we're going to do and how it's going to benefit them, and to understand that biophilic dialogue. But this exercise, it's even deeper. So I appreciate all the information you have given today. So with this said,
Good.
we
Thank you.
leave the microphones, very welcome. You leave the microphones open to everyone who wants to just raise your hand, and we'll let you ask your questions or your thoughts or but you feel to say, yeah, feel free to say what you think you want to say. Yes, Vanessa, I cannot see everyone, so just there these
Sorry.
hands there. Yeah, go ahead.
No, so I don't have a question as such. I just want to share the fact that I've also been very privileged to partake in at least 3 forest bathing courses. Well, not courses, I've partaken in being there and doing forest bathing with a trained person. I live in South Africa, and not far from me, there's a very indigenous forest, which has been marked as a perfect forest for forest bathing, as with the Japanese body of forest bathing, because of the microbial biodiversity and the trees, the phytoncides, the rivers that run through it, the moss, everything. So the person who's taken people on that was trained in Japan on Shinrin-yoku. And it really is a phenomenal thing to partake in. I was in a really bad space myself at the time I discovered it. And one of the things that we did in the forest bathing, which was very beneficial, was to stop on the one side of the river and get rid of no longer served you. And then to cross the river and turn around and say goodbye. And I found that really, really helped in getting rid of things that were holding me back. And the other thing that was really good in ours was that we had a tea ritual. Because there we had sourced green tea from Japan, and as you know, there are lots of health benefits to the tea. And we also did the grounding experience. So I really believe it's so beneficial to people. And it was also one of the things that got me onto the path of biophilic design at the end of the day.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Yes. No,
That's
thank
my
you.
feedback.
Thank you for thank
Pleasure.
you for sharing. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Vanessa, for sharing that. Yeah, lovely that you're telling
Pleasure.
experiences. Anyone else who wants to share something or ask a question?
Yes, may I?
Of course. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Hi.
Welcome.
First of all, Sophie, thank you very, very much for this beautiful presentation. It's totally it's my cup of tea because I am a mindfulness and a mental well-being trainer.
Okay. Interesting.
So I agree what you're saying. I love being in nature with my coaches, with groups. My question to you is, how can we get people into that being mode? And I'm sure you will agree with me that that's the most difficult thing, because we are living in a very performance raised and a very how do you say that, changing world, and I always compare it with, if we are not fast train, and there's a lot to do and a lot to decide and to choose, and then really being in nature, standing still and looking and using your senses, it's so important. But I know a lot of people are not even have the eye for it. So how are you doing that? That's my question.
That's an interesting one. I have a group locally that I lead every second weekend in my village. I have a group of about 15 people now. And when I get new people into the group, I always start by saying that in order for any kind of meditation or mindfulness practice to be sustainable, we have to start small. And I think a lot of people have ideas in their head of Buddhist monks sitting in retreat for hours, days at a time, and they find it overwhelming, and they try to create meditation habits that fall away very quickly. So I try to start with the 5 minutes a day approach. And also, if sitting down to meditate doesn't work for you, do it some other way. Go and stand in your garden, walk around your garden with a cup of tea, go for a walk with a friend in the forest, but agree not to talk, but for 20 minutes. Go out with your camera if it helps to use your camera to be mindful, if it helps to take a sketchbook to be mindful. So I think I'm all about accessibility. That's the first thing, micro meditations. The other thing I think really attracts people and draws people in is seasonal invitations. So kind of educating people about what's happening out there in the seasons. And of course, it's a slightly challenging concept because our seasons are shifting. But I still tend to use, I don't know if you can see this, I have here on my desk a wheel of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Which is based on paganism, kind of Norse and Celtic paganism, but it's to do with the eight festivals, the equinoxes and the solstices, and what we call the quarter and cross quarter festivals, which is maybe another conversation for another time. But by using the wheel of the year, I send people invitations to just reflect on what's going on out there. And people seem to really resonate with that. The idea that nature is constantly on the move, and how important that is for our health to be tuned in to that rhythm. So that's another thing that I'm a big believer in. And that also cuts across to things that traditionally would have been considered very woo-woo and a bit kind of, but out there. but things like moon cycles, sun cycles, moon cycles, things that the pagans have always been brilliant at, that are becoming much more mainstream now. Again, it comes down to observation and feeling the rhythm of life. Using invitations, which is a Japanese idea. I invite you in, I invite you to do, I invite you to notice. In fact, Nuria, I've noticed you use the language of invitation a lot. And I think it works brilliantly because it takes away the sense of obligation. Nothing is worse with meditation than people feeling it's something else they have to do. You know, today I have to get up at 5 o'clock and meditate for an hour before breakfast. Right? It's never going to work. Also, the other thing, if people are very, very stressed, not to meditate before exercising. You know, there's a reason why in yoga we begin with movement and finish with meditation. If you have very high levels of adrenaline going around the system, you need to burn that off before you can sit still. It's amazing how many people get that the wrong way around and think, I'm really, really stressed. I've just had an argument with my husband. I'm going to sit down and meditate, when actually what they need to do is 20 minutes of high impact exercise, brisk walk, and then sit down. So again, all of this is about accessibility, I think, and trying to take away the fear of what meditation is, and what mindfulness is. Does that help?
Yeah, sure. It's I think the like you say, the storytelling, the little steps, people don't make it too big. That's really, really important. And yeah, what you're saying, educate people, and what you were saying also in the presentation, like at the end, we are nature, no? We have been born in nature, and we have to bring that back to the people. And I'm coaching people also in the woods. It's actually the wood between Nodia and myself. So
Brilliant.
we meet each other, and people are coming from the city, and they step out of the metro. There's a metro station, and then they are totally surprised by what they see so close by the city. So it's really beautiful. Yeah. And you have to give them reminders, like you're saying. They need reminders to be aware. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Good. You're welcome.
Thank you, Suzanne, for this question, and Sophie for answering. Anyone else, some more questions or thoughts on what we're saying? Everyone is, yes, go ahead, Naz, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It was very inspiring. I want to share one experience. Once in the park, I tried to listen to the winds and plants. I feel that the leaves of the trees, which contact with each other in the wind, seems like they are clapping to me, and it was very interesting. The sound was like trees are clapping. It was interesting. I want to just share this experience.
I love that. It's so interesting how we naturally kind of screen out our sound observation, and some of that is because we're so busy in our heads, you know. But when you start to actually listen to what nature is doing, there are so many conversations happening. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Tilnas, for this, for sharing that. Thank you. Anyone else wants to add something, or I still have some questions. I was wondering, Sophie, what type of breakthroughs, what type of aha moments have you experienced with some of your clients? I don't know, maybe you have some.
interesting one. Oh gosh, I've had so many. Wouldn't even know where to begin. Actually, one of my most meaningful aha moments was with my daughter. She's not in my group, but it was, I think I put something on LinkedIn about this. It might be where we first connected, actually. We went up onto a high point above our village. We're very lucky. We live in the foothills of the Chiltern Hills near Oxford. And we have places where you can come up above the village and sit looking down in the foot of the hill down into the village. And we went up there because she loves being able to see the sunset. And she said, "Oh, mummy, can we go and watch the sunset?" You know, she knew that the colours of the sky are beautiful. She wanted to actually see it happening. So we went to watch the sunset. And when we were sitting up there, we were talking about the fact that we feel better when we can elevate, when we can go above our lives and look down. And it was an aha moment, both from a meditation point of view, but also from a biophilic design point of view, because of course we talk about elevated spaces and prospects. And there is a very real sense that when you lead people into a meditation where you ask people to look down on their lives, that they can feel more in control, less depressed, less stressed, because it's almost as if all the worry of life shrinks in comparison to us. So it's very interesting how many meditations will do that naturally. They will ask people to go and sit in a high place, or you'll have some meditation teachers who will say, ask you to imagine that you're floating above your life on a flying carpet or something like that. Now, I should add a caveat to this, is that I don't actually like people taking people flying. This goes back to my training, that I was taught not to take people into space, not to take people flying, and not to take people underwater. And the reason being is that even though it's an imaginative process, some people can't quite divorce their imagination from their physical experience. So it can actually induce a trauma response in some people who have maybe had, you know, an experience where they've been swimming and got out of control, for example, or some meditation teachers ask you to imagine walking through fire, because fire can be very cleansing. But of course, that's could be problematic for someone who has an experience with fire in real terms. So there are certain scenarios that I think we have to be very careful with. But it was just really interesting how my daughter was saying, "I always feel good, mummy, when we go up high." And I was thinking, that's prospect, that's elevation, that's, you know, being able to see threat, but also being able to feel in control. So that's one really obvious one. I think generally my aha moments are around what people say when they connect again. Oh, it feels so good to find nature again, to feel like that I'm part of it. I haven't felt part of it for such a long time. I'm sure there are others that I can I can come up with,
Already
but yeah.
wonderful. It shows the why of the prospect and refuge, and it's yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that one with your
No,
daughter.
that's right.
Thanks, Sophie. I see that there, Valentina, she has her hand raised. So go ahead, Valentina.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi,
It was
Valentina.
great to listen to you. You have
Thank
such a
you.
gentle voice. I must say I'm not that much in, I don't have that much experience. I don't have experience with what you do, but as I was listening and I came in my mind, what I wanted to also add is I was renting an apartment here. I'm living in Croatia at the island, and I noticed as you were speaking how much we can benefit from the nature, and especially when you come to the vacation. So while I was renting the apartment, I was thinking like what I can add to the like pictures to the guests so they can be reminded to be more mindful or to be more relaxed. So I put like a few frames with words, just go out and get vitamin C as much as you can, or like no worries. I even didn't put the watch, the clock on the wall. So, and instead I said like, it's you are on the vacation, don't think about the time or something like that. But can you add more things that we can do? Like I would like to apply.
What you mean, bringing virtual nature mindfulness prompts into space in terms of kind of pictures and things?
Yeah, or just like what can we add to people who are, we are not that much connected, but I was thinking like, okay, if I can make only and put some music of birds or waves or something that, or if I can make a notebook, like what can you do on the vacation, just be more relaxed.
Absolutely. No, there are lots of micro things that you can incorporate. One that you've already said is a really good one. Sound, natural recordings. You can get lots of things on Spotify, the sound of birds, the sound of running water, natural soundtracks. That's a good one. Photography or film of natural images. There's some really interesting research happening at the moment on the power of virtual nature, and it's not the same. It's not quite the same as being in nature, obviously, but there are some measurable benefits to, for example, having pictures of woods on the wall, or pictures of waterfalls, or video clips of running water. So things like that, they have some inherent value as kind of mindfulness prompts, definitely. Tactile objects, may sound really obvious, but having bowls of pine cones or plants, obviously, anything that people can sit with and connect with, pick up and touch, encouragements to sit with even a vase of flowers. If you've got a lovely vase of wild flowers, to ask people to sit with those flowers and just really kind of hone in on them and sit and notice. Some of the work I do at Oxford Botanic Garden is literally sitting with the flowers in the garden and asking people to notice the colour, the smell, what's happening with the insects that are crawling in and out of the heart of the flower. Is that telling them some sort of story? So yeah, there are lots of things you can do by bringing quite simple objects into a space. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I also had an idea, as we have, I know of one guy who is taking like a tour guide, who wants to take people outside in the woods and to explore. So I was thinking to get involved with him and to offer for the guests this kind of a tour. So yeah, still thinking about how to make, as the question before was how to offer that to the people, like just invitations and things like that. It's much, as you said,
invitations, and as I mentioned when we were talking about the 3 parts of storytelling, to incorporate benefits. What are the benefits of doing this? What, breaking down into simple bullet points, leading with the why somebody will benefit from that kind of connection.
Okay, I need to apply this on my Instagram page. More and add these kind of pictures and images so people can be reminded. Thank you. I will. Where can we find you? To do you have a website?
I'm on the platform, on Habit Harmonia platform, in the ambassadors section.
I'm there.
Or LinkedIn or my website.
Okay, I will search for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valentina. We have the last question. Catalina has her hand raised up. And with this one, we will finish. We're going over the
Okay.
hour otherwise, and I don't want to take all the time for today. We will invite Sophie to do other talks. This is so inspiring and interesting. But I would like to give now the last question to Catalina. Catalina, are you there?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Sophie, for this. This has been very interesting for me to see, and especially because I feel like the conversation about the spiritual realm is very untouched. It's very personal too, so I feel like it's not easy to talk about. And I was thinking a lot about the side that's not so romanticized. Like one thing that I notice whenever I go and take walks in nature or try to meditate outdoors is how it helps me look at the lessons of life. Like when I see things that are not growing because maybe the roots are not so strong, or when it's winter season, or just flowers that have finished the cycle and then they just die. And thinking about these things, I always feel like it's also important to talk about them without being so fatalistic, nor going to the other extreme. But it's always good because I think a very impactful experience I had with meditation, it wasn't even outdoors, it was in a yoga class. And at the end, when we were in the meditation, the teacher would mention how it's important for us to go through a storm that we were facing or living at the moment, but always keeping in mind that once that storm passes and summer, or the sunshine comes back, it doesn't mean that another storm won't come. And so that to me was, I remember it very vividly, because we tend to think that, oh, like we're waiting for it to pass, and we're not just wanting to go through it and learn from it, and also learn how to adapt. And I feel like that's also very important to talk about, like all of the amazing things that nature can do, but also all of the lessons of the things that are natural, such as death cycles, or like the difficulties of a tree that couldn't grow, or like speaking about our bodies as a territory that we need to take care of. And even if we don't see the fruit or the flower flourish from one day to another, if we are really working on it, it's gathering strength for it to flourish at some time. And so I don't know if this is something that you also emphasize on in your in your method, like about the death cycles, or the nature of things also coming to an end, or maybe sometimes not working out because there was something missing, or like a very unfortunate, like random factor that didn't allow it to flourish the way we expected it to go.
No, absolutely. You've raised something really, really important. And what's interesting is that when I send people off to do their personal, both in the forest bathing event, but also in the garden event, people will often come back with stories about death, decay, loss, sadness, bereavement. It's almost like there's an unacknowledged need to explore these things, and nature gives them the perfect kind of the perfect framework, the perfect context to do that. And actually, some of the most incredible shared meditations have been where somebody's been sitting with a flower in the garden, and they've noticed that it's just starting to go over, it's just starting to wilt, or it might already be dead, and they're saying, oh, but there's beauty in that decay, there's beauty in the end, as much the end of the cycle as the beginning. And as Western cultures, we are so fixated on life always being at its kind of peak, and I think yeah, you're absolutely right. There's so much learning around sitting with loss, or sitting with decay, or sitting with sadness. And yeah, absolutely, nature gives us a space to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. And thank you, Sophie, for all the great information and the beautiful, beautiful things you have taught us today. It's very inspiring. I really appreciate it. And I welcome you to come back. Next week, we will have another webinar. We are constantly inputting on your ideas. I welcome you also to use the platform, the ecosystem to connect and to give us also inspiration. You're also free to inspire us. And thank you. I was a great session today. So looking forward to see you back again and wishing you a wonderful day. Thank you. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Good.